Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the tools that I use when I do watercolor illustrations and show you a couple of the brands that I use on a regular basis. So for the initial sketch I use these Prismacolor very thin colored pencils. They work a little bit better than graphite pencils because they don't smudge. And for inking, I use Pigma Micron pens because they do not bleed when they come in contact with water. I like the smaller sizes because I can get a lot of fine little details, and I do work quite small normally. For brushes, I use a couple different types. For some of my illustrations, I use these round brushes by Creative Mark. And for other illustrations, I use this Pentel water brush. This is one of my favorite things because it's very convenient. I don't have to fill up a jar with water and I can carry it with me anywhere and not worry about spilling water all over everything. I use this water brush a lot with the pan or dry watercolors. But for these examples, I'm going to be using this small size 2 round brush by Creative Mark. So, on to the paint. The first watercolors that I ever bought were these Soho Watercolors. These are relatively inexpensive, and I find that unlike a lot of inexpensive watercolors, they don't use a lot of filler. There's a lot of pigment in them, and you don't have to work too hard to build up the color and to get very bright colors and very dark colors. I find that a lot of cheaper watercolors leave this chalky finish and they dry a lot lighter, and it's a lot harder to build up the color because they get quite grainy. I will start by showing you how these look on the paper. The paper I'm using is by Canon. It is their 140-pound watercolor paper. I use this brand as well as the Strathmore brand on a regular basis. It depends on the day and what effect that I want as to whether I use the Canon or the Strathmore. The Strathmore has more of a texture to it and the watercolor sits on top, and the Canon paper is a lot smoother and the watercolor seeps into it. Now I'm going to try to make the colors as similar as possible between all the examples, but some paint sets don't have the same colors, so I'll show you as close as possible. The colors I'm using in the Soho brand are indigo, red purple, and yellow ochre. I'm putting down a little water so that the colors flow better without having to add too much paint. These paints mix really well with water straight out of the tube. I find some cheaper brands don't mix very well at all. You have to really work at them to get them to dissolve, and some even then don't fully dissolve. It depends on how much filler they have. Like I said, these have a lot of pigment, so going straight to the paper you can see that you can get this really dark color. I haven't added any paint here at all. I'm just dragging it from the corners. You can see how far this paint goes. You don't have to use much to fully fill an image. I'm going to speed up the video a little bit so you don't get bored. Next up is this Lukas watercolor travel set. As you can see when I get this opened, I use this one a lot. I used it for all my daily sketches last year. I think there were only a few that I used a different brand, but they last a long time. For these, I use my Pentel water brush. But for this video, I'm just going to stick with my little round brush. Now, these paints do not have names, so I'm just going to go with a navy blue, kind of a purplish red, and a golden color. This is the least expensive brand that I own. I think this was $7, I think. Oops. Oh well. Anyways, these paints have a chalkier finish than the Soho because they have more filler in them than paint. But I do like them because they go a long ways. As you can see, I've had them used them a whole year, and I still have plenty left. And I also love this navy blue color. It's a mix between like an indigo and a Payne's gray, I guess. But I really like this one. I kind of like desaturated blues. This watercolor doesn't flow as well as the Soho and as some of the other brands, so you really have to drag it and have to add a lot of water to get it to go where you want it to go and to stay workable for any amount of time. That doesn't bother me too much. I kind of like the effect it gives, but if that bothers you, then you might not want it. So next up is these Mission Gold watercolors. These are definitely a higher end watercolor compared to the Soho and the Lukas. These are quite a bit more expensive. These were actually a gift to me, so I'm not 100% certain how much this set costs. I'll look it up and see if I can find it. I love these paints. They are very pigmented, and a little bit goes a really long way, and they're very rewettable. Like, you can go back even on the paper and re-wet them and rework them. They're not quite as rewettable as gouache, but they do a really good job. Good job for watercolors. I mean, as you can see, they were squeezed out of a tube into the tray, and they re-wet very well in the tray. I can use them like they're straight out of the tube almost. And since I don't have the tubes that these originally came in, I don't know the names of the colors that I used. I just tried to match the other colors that I have used from the other sets as closely as possible. Watercolors. I just bought these, so I'm trying them out for the first time. They are another travel set, kind of like the Lukas, but you have a lot more paint colors and they're a little more expensive, so I'm going to assume that the quality is higher. So here are all the colors. Definitely a lot more color choices than the Lukas. And it has a water brush. Hopefully this brush is as good quality as Pentel. I bought some cheaper water brushes not long ago and they leaked really bad. And it's got this, I'm assuming this is to clean the brush, so I don't have to carry around this paper towel that looks like Paint Factory sneezed on it. So for the colors, I'm going to use Prussian blue. I think I'm going to have to mix the red because they only have bright reds and then they have purple. So I think I might mix the Crimson Lake with purple. And then they have Permanent Yellow Deep. I'm going to use that. So first impressions is that this is a rather pigmented pan watercolor, a lot more so than the Lukas. It mixes really well with the water. I did have to work at it a little bit to get it started, but that's normal for pan watercolors. And I'm a little disappointed that they don't have a darker blue. This is the darkest blue they have. I would have to mix it with, they have a Payne's gray on here. I'd have to mix it with the gray in order to get it darker, and then I'm not even sure how dark I could get it from that. It seems like all these colors are quite bright, which is very good if you want some very saturated paintings. I usually work with more muted colors, but I think I'm going to enjoy working with these because I don't have a lot of bright colors. So there we have it. There's the 4 main watercolor brands that I use. Hope you enjoyed and hope it wasn't too long. Bye.